People are constantly revealing who they are, but almost no one knows how to truly see it. Gestures, pauses, discomfort, subtle reactions. Every moment carries a hidden message. The problem is, we were taught to trust only words. This video presents 18 psychological truths inspired by Nietzsche. Ideas that help you perceive what most people hide, even from themselves. This isn't a surface-level guide. It's a journey in 3 parts, each one sharpening your perception. If you stay until the end, you won't just see others more clearly. You'll see yourself in ways you never imagined. From the moment we learn to speak, we're taught to trust what people say. Words become the currency of truth. But Nietzsche warned us, language often protects us from the very truths we're trying to avoid. Because people don't speak from clarity. They speak from fear, from memory, from roles they've rehearsed to survive. Someone says they're fine, that they've moved on, but something flickers underneath. A pause, a nervous laugh, a tension they can't quite hide. That's what makes people so difficult to read. Not because they're hiding from you, but because they're hiding from themselves. And yet, the mask always slips. There's always a leak, a look that lingers too long, a deflection when things get close. You've seen it. You just didn't know how to name it. Nietzsche believed everyone wears a mask. Not out of deception, but out of necessity. The persona we show is often a shield, built in childhood, shaped by what was punished and what was rewarded. The more someone perfects the role, the further they drift from who they are. And that silent grief of not being seen lives behind most smiles. This isn't about tricks. It's a psychological journey through 3 layers: the mask, the rupture, and the soul beneath it all. Each of the 18 truths you're about to hear is rooted in Nietzsche's raw understanding of the human psyche. They don't offer control. They offer clarity. Not just about others, but about the roles you've been playing too. Most people think they're good at hiding what hurts. They think their words are strong enough to mask what's underneath. But the body always speaks, and the truth always leaks out. It happens in the way someone hesitates when the topic gets close, in how they smile too long, in how they deflect a question that cuts too deep. The signs are small but relentless, and once you learn to see them, you realize something simple and unsettling. Everyone is leaking the truth. They just don't know it. 1. Everyone wears a mask. Not to deceive, but to survive. No one escapes this. We all learn early that certain parts of us aren't safe to show. So we build a version of ourselves that seems acceptable. Not real, just acceptable. The quiet child becomes agreeable. The rejected one becomes impressive. The broken one becomes funny. We call it personality, but often it's pain in disguise. The mask isn't evil, it's protection. But it's still a mask, and it always slips. 2. What someone condemns in others reveals what they're hiding in themselves. This is one of Nietzsche's sharpest insights: projection. When someone constantly attacks arrogance, they're likely insecure about their own worth. When they mock emotional people, they might be terrified of their own feelings. We hate in others what we fear in ourselves. So the next time someone criticizes with intensity, don't get defensive. Get curious. Ask, what part of themselves are they trying not to see? 3. Silence, hesitation, and deflection reveal more than words. Nietzsche didn't trust language. He believed it often concealed more than it revealed. Watch the pauses, the sudden topic changes, the short, rehearsed answers to deep questions. Those silences are not empty. They're full of fear, of defense, of things not ready to be named. 4. Excessive virtue can be disguised vanity. There's a kind of morality that's not about integrity, it's about image. When someone loudly proclaims their goodness, when they always point out the faults of others, when they correct, perform, and signal constantly, it's not always purity. Sometimes it's superiority in disguise. True virtue is quiet. It doesn't need applause. 5. The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. I'm fine. I don't care. I've moved on. These aren't lies meant to deceive you. They're lies people repeat to themselves until they sound like truth. Not because they're malicious, but because they're trying to function in a world that never taught them how to feel. Self-deception is survival. And the inconsistencies? That's where the truth peeks through. 6. Forced superiority often hides deep inferiority. The person who brags constantly, who always has to win, who dominates, controls, interrupts, they're not strong. They're scared. They're performing confidence to drown out the echo of not being enough. Behind the crown is usually a child, still begging to be seen. Reading someone isn't about judgment. It's not about labeling people or putting them into categories. It's about learning how to see what was never spoken and never punished. Because the more you understand someone's inner world, the less you need to protect yourself from their behavior. You begin to see beyond the reaction into the reason. The man who constantly interrupts might be terrified of being forgotten. The woman who corrects everyone around her might feel like she'll only be respected if she's always right. And the friend who says they're over it while avoiding eye contact might still be bleeding from a wound they never named. When you begin to see people this way, you stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what happened to them. This isn't about excusing behavior. It's about understanding the engine behind it. And that's what Nietzsche was really pointing to. He didn't want you to become some emotionless analyst, coldly dissecting people's flaws. He wanted you to wake up to the fact that what you see is rarely the whole story. And once you know that, once you really know it, you stop getting pulled into the mask. You stop reacting to the noise. You start listening to the silence underneath. The next time someone lashes out, you'll feel the pain behind it. The next time someone brags nonstop, you'll hear the insecurity trying to be drowned out. The next time someone performs happiness, you'll sense the grief behind their smile. And the more you train your mind to see it, the less you'll take things personally. Because it was never about you. It was about them and what they've been carrying, sometimes for years. But here's the part most people miss. You're not outside of this. You wear a mask too. You say things you don't fully believe. You avoid topics that feel too real. You smile when you want to disappear. We all do it. Not because we're fake, but because we're afraid to be fully seen. So learning to read people isn't about power. It's about presence. It's about seeing the child behind the critic, the longing behind the anger, the tenderness behind the performance. It's about staying rooted in yourself while observing the chaos in someone else. Because if you lose yourself while trying to read another, you're not reading, you're absorbing. And that doesn't lead to wisdom. It leads to confusion. True perception doesn't blur your boundaries. It sharpens them. To read someone well, you must hold two truths at once: what they show and what they hide. And when you stop trying to win, prove, or fix, and you just observe with soft eyes, something shifts. You become a mirror, not a weapon. You become someone who sees deeply and still chooses grace. And that, more than any tactic or technique, is what makes you powerful. The mask never holds forever. At some point, in pressure, in conflict, in silence, it begins to slip. And when it does, something raw appears underneath. Not the monster people fear, but the fear itself. Most people don't perform confidence because they're strong. They perform it because the alternative, being seen as unsure, guilty, or broken, feels unbearable. This is where the cracks begin to show. This is when the performance stops being sustainable and starts being a cry for help in disguise. 7. Most actions are driven by unconscious fear. We like to think people act from desire, from passion, clarity, conviction. But more often than not, the engine is fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of not being good enough. It's why someone over-explains, dominates a conversation, or disappears without warning. They're not choosing freely. They're reacting to a threat you can't see. But they feel it all the time. The person who always agrees may not be agreeable. They may have been punished for saying no. The one who avoids eye contact may not be rude. They may have learned that looking directly gets them hurt. So when someone says yes too quickly, ask what they're afraid will happen if they say no. 8. constant criticism is usually projection. Watch the person who always finds fault in others. The one who mocks weakness, who attacks emotion, who scoffs at softness. They're not describing others. They're confessing what they can't hold in themselves. The man who mocks vulnerability might be drowning in his own. The woman who attacks appearance might be trapped in her reflection. Nietzsche understood this. Judgment is rarely about the target, it's a mirror. And if you listen closely, criticism reveals exactly where someone's wound lives. People don't criticize what they've accepted in themselves. They criticize what they've exiled. And in that exile, they become harsh, intolerant, and sometimes cruel. But cruelty isn't clarity. It's avoidance. 9. Exaggerated confidence hides guilt or insecurity. Some people enter the room with unshakable certainty. They speak in absolutes. They act like nothing rattles them. But watch their eyes when they're challenged. Watch their posture under pressure. You'll see it. The tight jaw, the subtle defensiveness, the overcorrection. Because what looks like confidence is often compensation. A cover for guilt, for regret, for not being who they wish they were. Many of the strongest personas were built on secret shame. The achiever who failed once and never forgave themselves. The perfectionist who made a mistake and was humiliated for it. Real peace doesn't need to perform. Real confidence doesn't need applause. 10. Emotional exaggeration is a mask for internal doubt. The person who insists, "I don't care what anyone thinks," probably cares deeply. The one who says, "I'm always happy," probably isn't. Exaggeration is the ego turning up the volume, because it's afraid you'll hear the doubt underneath. Nietzsche believed that extremism reveals imbalance. The louder someone speaks about how certain they are, the more likely they're trying to silence something inside. So don't take the volume at face value. Listen to what it's trying to drown out. Because beneath every bold performance, there's almost always a fragile truth, trying not to be found. Not all control is about power. Sometimes it's about panic. When someone obsesses over the details, rearranges every plan, manages every person around them, it's easy to assume they're simply intense or even driven. But intensity has layers, and one of those layers is fear. There's a type of fear that isn't loud, but constant. It hums beneath the surface. A fear that if you let go of even one thing, everything will collapse. 11. The obsession with external control usually reflects inner chaos. Nietzsche saw this long before we had psychological labels for it. He observed that when the inner world is disordered, the outer world becomes a battlefield of control. People try to control the outside because something inside them feels uncontrollable. The perfectionist who can't let go of a schedule may have grown up in emotional unpredictability. The partner who micromanages every detail may carry deep wounds of betrayal or abandonment. The boss who dominates every meeting might still be trying to silence the part of themselves that was once powerless. This isn't about personality. It's about emotional architecture. Control is a response, a way to prevent the return of an old internal storm. But here's what makes it so deceptive. People who seek control don't appear broken. They appear capable, focused, even admirable. That's what makes the illusion so powerful. They may even fool themselves into believing they're just being responsible. But underneath the structure is survival. If they stop planning, they'll feel the ground shake. If they stop fixing others, they'll have to sit with their own pain. If they stop organizing everything outside, they'll have to feel what's collapsing inside. That's the hidden terror. Stillness. Stillness invites everything they've been avoiding. So instead, they stay busy. They overfunction. They overcommit. They stay in control of others. So they don't have to face themselves. But this constant control has a cost. Relationships begin to suffocate. Spontaneity dies. And the person slowly disconnects from who they really are. Not out of deception, but out of necessity. Because what they fear most is not chaos in the world. It's chaos in the mirror. This is why Nietzsche warned against appearances of strength. Because sometimes what looks like strength is just fear in a disciplined costume. You'll recognize it in the way someone flinches when plans change, in how they correct minor mistakes with major energy, in how they react when you don't meet an expectation they never voiced. It's not about you. It's about the war they're trying to manage inside. Reading this doesn't mean you challenge their control. It means you understand it. It means you see that underneath the grip is grief. And maybe, if they ever feel safe enough, they'll begin to loosen it. Not because someone forced them to, but because someone finally saw what they were trying to hold together alone. Some people don't whisper their pain. They drown it in noise. You've seen them. They're vibrant, loud, unforgettable, always posting, always performing, always smiling like their life is a movie. At first, it looks like confidence. They seem magnetic, charismatic, full of life. But if you stay long enough, if you really watch, you'll start to feel it. That something doesn't add up. That the performance is too polished, too continuous, too dependent on being seen. And when that happens, you're not looking at freedom. You're looking at fear in disguise. 12. The louder the performance, the more silent the pain beneath it. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He believed that when someone doesn't feel loved for who they are, they begin to exaggerate who they think they need to be. They turn themselves into a show, not because they want attention, but because they fear what happens without it. It starts early. A child who's only praised when they achieve learns to become the achiever. A teenager who's only noticed when they make people laugh learns to perform joy even when they're hurting. And as adults, that performance becomes their identity. The problem? Performances don't leave space for intimacy, only applause. And applause doesn't heal. The louder someone insists they're happy, the more likely they're hiding sadness that no one ever made space for. The more someone demands attention, the more likely they once felt invisible and never recovered from it. And it's not just social. Some people perform emotional strength, always the caretaker, never the one who breaks. Some perform wisdom, always teaching, never pausing long enough to be known. Others perform resilience, laughing through pain, brushing off betrayal, staying strong long past the point of exhaustion. These performances can be beautiful, artful, even inspiring, but that doesn't make them honest. And if you listen too closely to the volume, you miss the silence it's trying to cover. True peace doesn't need to be witnessed. It simply is. The person who truly knows themselves doesn't need to convince the world. They're not afraid of quiet. They're not threatened by being unseen. But the one who constantly performs, who lives online, who thrives on likes, who tells stories where they're always the hero, they're not always celebrating life. Sometimes, they're begging not to disappear. And that's what makes this so delicate. You can't confront a performance with confrontation. You confront it with presence, with the ability to see what they're trying to protect, and not punish them for needing protection. Because no one performs for fun. They perform for survival, for recognition, for the love they never learned to receive in stillness. So the next time someone seems too much, too perfect, too loud, too visible, pause before you judge. Ask what they're afraid will happen if they finally sit in silence, and no one claps, because that silence might be the one thing they've been running from their entire life. And seeing that, without trying to fix it, might be the most honest act of love they've never known how to ask for. By now, something in you has shifted. You don't just hear words, you feel the space around them. You start noticing the way people pause before answering, how their stories repeat, how their emotions leak through even their most polished lines. You're no longer just listening, you're reading. And the deeper you read, the more you realize that people aren't logical. They're emotional, they're wounded, they're carrying stories they never chose, and still trying to make sense of them. 13. People don't speak from logic, they speak from pain. Someone says, "I don't believe in love." They're not stating a fact. They're protecting a wound. People don't build opinions from evidence. They build them from heartbreak, from betrayal, from the moment they needed something and didn't get it. Then they wrap that pain in logic. to make it sound respectable. But listen closely. What they defend most intensely is often what once shattered them. 14. The way someone responds to weakness reveals their true strength. You want to know who someone really is? Don't look at how they treat the powerful. Look at how they treat those who can't defend themselves. The person who mocks vulnerability is afraid of their own. The one who punishes every mistake likely grew up without permission to fail. Real strength isn't control. It's compassion. It's the ability to hold space for imperfection without turning it into a threat. If someone can witness your sadness without needing to fix it, punish it, or run away, that's power. 15. Those who fear being forgotten often chase attention. Not everyone wants to be famous. Some people just want to be remembered, to not be erased. The person who always needs to be seen, who dominates every room, who posts every detail of their life, they're not always full of themselves. Sometimes they're terrified of fading, of living and dying without leaving a mark. The child who was ignored becomes the adult who performs for visibility, not out of arrogance, but out of hunger. 16. Harsh criticism can mask frustrated admiration. Not all attacks come from hate. Some come from longing. The person who ridicules your ambition might secretly wish they had the courage to try. The one who mocks your freedom might still be imprisoned by their own rules. Envy doesn't always sound jealous. Sometimes it sounds righteous. But behind that righteousness is often a voice that whispers, I want that too, but I don't believe I can have it. 17. People repeat childhood roles without realizing it. You've heard it before. People don't change. But Nietzsche would say people repeat. We repeat what made us feel safe. We recreate what made us feel loved. Even when it hurts, the one who was punished for having emotions becomes emotionally distant. The one who had to earn love becomes the overachiever. The one who never felt chosen chases unavailable people. They think it's personality. It's biography. 18. Behavioral patterns are emotional confessions. Someone ghosts when things get close. They're confessing, I was hurt when I got attached. Someone flirts with everyone but connects with no one. They're saying, I don't feel safe being seen. Someone lives in chaos. They're showing you where the pain entered. People don't always have the words to express what broke them, but they have patterns. And patterns are the body's way of remembering what the mind can't say. If you learn to read those patterns, you stop being surprised. You stop being hurt. You start understanding. And once you understand someone's wound, you no longer need to react to their weapon. To read others is to remember yourself. These 18 truths weren't meant to give you power over people. They were meant to return your attention inward. Because behind every reaction, every projection, every mask, there's a hidden story shaped by absence, silence, and the quiet hunger to be seen. Nietzsche didn't want you to see through others just to feel superior. He wanted you to awaken, to realize that what you judge in others is often what you avoid in yourself. And what you admire might be what you secretly long to reclaim. When someone's behavior doesn't make sense, try looking with different eyes, not for flaws, but for the wound they never learned to name. And quietly ask yourself, am I willing to see what they couldn't express? Am I willing to see myself? If this message resonated with something deep in you, write in the comments, I choose to see without judgment. And if you're ready for more truth, more silence, less noise, you're welcome to stay.